Everything began on a terrible night while Ing was patrolling the roof, only to find a mysterious girl in the air. Musi, who was busy activating the heavenly tribulation, immediately got distracted and, upon looking at him, was suddenly struck by lightning, sending her back to the ground unconscious. Ing initially pretended not to see her, but changed his mind to try what he had seen in the movies. He put his mouth on hers immediately, causing a glow that lit up the sky. But just a few seconds later, Musi opened her eyes to his ugly face and slapped him. He panicked and tried to explain that it was all a misunderstanding, but she accused him of stealing her first kiss, slapped him again, and left furiously, hoping never to see him again. Meanwhile, on her way back, she was happy that at least the idiot hadn't seen the heavenly tribulation, or he might have died, but then suddenly, she felt a shock and realized her power had been reduced. Wondering what had happened and thinking she needed to investigate. That same night, Ing began to feel a fever while sleeping, and a bright light illuminated his room. The next day, he sat in a park wondering why he was feeling so refreshed and why his eyesight had improved, to the point he could now see melons from 3 kilometers away. He suddenly noticed the violent girl from the previous day passing by with a random rich guy, who was asking her out, and thought the two idiots belonged to each other. But then an invisible scary eye appeared in the sky and, upon noticing a new cultivator, decided to test Ying's new ability, dropping a large billboard onto a random girl on the street. Seeing this, Ying immediately ran towards the girl, and when the billboard almost turned her from 3-dimensional to 2-dimensional, he accidentally activated an extraordinary power that made the billboard crash into a different building, fainting afterwards. He woke up shocked in a hotel room, tied to a bed, with Musi touching sensitive places. She unbuttoned her top so he could see her breasts, but when she saw he was acting like a novice, she backed away, saying the technique she learned on YouTube hadn't worked. Musi then said she was going to reclaim what belonged to her, but he didn't remember taking anything from her. So she reminded him about the woman he saved and said he had used her power to save her, although Ing still thought Musi was lying. Musi then revealed she was a cultivator and activated a sword, threatening to cut his balls off, giving him 2 choices: die under her black sky or cultivate together with her and become immortal. Later, in the elevator, he marveled at the city's beauty, but Musi told him not to be fooled, as that was just the surface, since the world was more evil and dark than he thought. Although Ing replied that while he knew that, he preferred to keep his eyes on the bright part and use his cultivation powers to help those in the dark. But Musi told him it wasn't as easy as he thought. They went to the roof of a skyscraper, and Musi asked Ing if he wanted to develop his cultivation fast or slow. He replied he wanted it fast, and she told him to jump off the building, shocking him, explaining that people usually became very powerful facing death, and since he didn't want to die, he could awaken his powers. However, Ing asked what happened if he failed, and she replied there would only be news about his school's safety embracing the ground the next day. But if he refused to jump, he would end up dead anyway, since other cultivators would come after him, so he might as well try. Ing, with no choice, thought this was her cheesy way of getting revenge, so he approached the edge, still hesitant, but Musi pushed him. As he fell, he tried to enter the avatar state to summon the power he used to save the girl earlier that day, but soon realized he was fried and was really going to die. His eyes darkened, but then he saw Musi coming towards him, and hope filled his eyes again. However, she caught him and said she was going to die with him. He accepted his fate and hugged her tightly as they continued to fall, but suddenly, he grew wings and landed like a pro before taking off again, as if he had been doing it for 15 years. Meanwhile, Musi was already getting wet from his aura, but suddenly she grabbed him and brought him to the ground, telling him not to get cocky because the cultivation world showed no mercy to novices, asking him not to show off next time, or someone other than her would be there to send him to his maker. Meanwhile, in a different location, a master had sensed some power fluctuations and asked his subordinate to check and test his strength, ordering him to eliminate him if he considered him weak. The next day, as Musi and Ing walked down the street, the unemployed rich idiot still hoped Musi would agree to go out with him, but Musi said she was very tired because she had just returned from a hotel with Ing. The idiot instantly got jealous and tried to beat up Ing senselessly, but Musi intervened with a slap to his disgusting face, saying only she was allowed to hit her man, walking away with Ing, who walked behind her like a coward who had just been defended. Later, Musi found Ing gaming on an old phone and mocked him, saying she wasn't sure if he could even use the power. He replied he was fine with a messaging function, but realizing it was his broken side talking, she took the phone and handed him a new one, making him cry instantly. Afterwards, he got curious and asked why she hadn't eliminated him, even though she was as powerful as the others in the cultivation world she had warned him about, and she replied it was because he had sucked most of her spiritual energy and that if she left him, she would disappear forever unless they cultivated together. Then he asked if they could get down that night, instantly making her heart beat faster. And she immediately grabbed him and started running in any direction because she couldn't wait until night since her pants were already wet. As she dragged him, Ing realized he was already falling in love with her. Meanwhile, the girl sent to test him, was in a fury, feasting on blood as if it were juice. The next morning, Ryue took to the streets searching for the guy with the spiritual energy and realizing it might be troublesome to find him, had the idea to post his pictures on Tinder with the dancing seduction spell to attract guys. But only ugly fat guys with no spiritual energy came after her, and she beat them all up out of anger. Frustrated, she wondered why the real guy wasn't showing up and thought maybe he belonged to the rainbow community, so she decided to change the direction of her seduction. That night, in the security guard's dorm, while Ing was endlessly scrolling through YouTube shorts, he suddenly noticed his senior Lee, who happened to be in that category, get up after talking to a cute boy on his PC. Lee went out searching for the boy like a lamb to the slaughter, and noticing his strange behavior, Ing decided to follow him before he became the next victim of organ harvesting. Lee headed towards Ryue like a zombie, and upon seeing him, she immediately checked if he had spiritual energy, but found he had no energy, let alone spiritual, so she turned to leave, but Lee pursued her, causing her to punch his chin, launching him into the air. Ing immediately activated his wings and saved him, amusing Ryue, because she had just found who she was looking for. Meanwhile, Lee transferred his affection to Ing and started desiring his magnum, scaring Ing as he thought about Lee's tool destroying him. Ryue removed the dancing seduction spell, and Lee immediately regained his senses, but thought Ing was trying to hit on him and got shy, although Ing immediately apologized before the chubby guy forced him on all fours. While fleeing, Ing was suddenly hit again by Ryue's seduction spell and started acting like a zombie, desiring her intensely. Soon he found her on the roof, and she immediately activated spiritual restraints around them to prevent his spiritual energy from leaking for other cultivators to detect. Ing acted so cringely that she punched him in the face and removed the spell instantly before getting tempted to eat his flesh. Coming to his senses, Ing wondered what was happening and how he got to the roof. Ru then summoned a sword intending to finish him, making him realize what Musi said was true, and he tried to escape, but she caught him and threw him back to the ground, taking his pants off in the process. Ryue tried to attack him again, but Musi interrupted at that moment. Upon seeing Ing, she called him shameless for lowering his pants in front of a girl, but he said he could explain, while Ryue revealed that Ing had proposed to her earlier, and upon hearing this, Musi told him to stay on his knees until she finished dealing with Ryue, making him think about how useless and cheap he was. A few minutes after their punishment started, the clown spotted the two girls arguing and had the audacity to claim they were fighting over him, which angered both of them so much that they immediately taught him a reality lesson, knocking him out. The two girls prepared to fight, and Musi told Ing she would communicate with him via telepathy from then on. She scanned their power levels and found that Ing was at the middle key condensation stage, while Musi was at the early foundation establishment stage, making Ryue lose her mind because these two weaklings had the audacity to release spiritual energy in public. Musi used her mental hotline to remind Ing about the cultivation lesson she gave him during the last training session, explaining how the different cultivation levels worked and how there was a huge chasm between each stage, basically saying he would be sent to the afterlife if he faced someone stronger, unless he had some special weapon to balance things. Ing suddenly launched his attack, and Musi immediately realized that Ryue was actually at the late foundation establishment stage, meaning she was far beyond their level, and even if she teamed up with Ing, they would be completely destroyed. But Musi didn't back down, summoning her sword and entering the fight anyway. The two began to fight in an intense exchange of blows. Then Ryue drew her flaming sword and launched a blazing attack, but Musi disappeared and teleported right above her before attacking with her black sky technique, making Ryue crash to the ground like a meteor. Musi screamed for Ing to get out of there immediately and promised she would catch up to him later. The two fighters faced each other again with their powers, but Ryue completely overpowered Musi and grabbed her by the neck, dragging her into the sky before throwing her back to Earth as if playing volleyball. Musi became extremely weak and started writhing in pain, but Ryue wasn't finished yet and continued to beat her, summoning an even more powerful attack and launching it at the poor girl. Musi quickly raised her defense restriction to block it, but the attack was too overwhelming for her. Meanwhile, as Ing was escaping, his brain finally started working, and he realized Musi would never get out of that fight alive with such a huge difference in power levels. On the other side of the city, Ryue's master finished adding more victims to his collection and started thinking about harvesting Ryue's soul too, after she returned from her mission, wanting to use it to advance to the final stage of core formation, because loyalty meant nothing to him. Musi continued fighting with everything she had, but ended up being heavily struck. Ryue approached and tried to plant toxic thoughts in her head about how Ing was a coward for running away and leaving her behind, but Musi refused to think badly of him, saying she wouldn't let this villainous mess with her head, stating that people like Ryue would never understand true loyalty, which made her absolutely furious, immediately trying to send Musi to the other world. But Ing came flying back like a superhero and took the blow in her place. Musi, who thought she was about to become a ghost, was completely shocked to see him return. She started crying and remembered her mother telling her when she was little that the man she would marry one day would have to be someone who could comfort her, take care of her, and protect her from getting hurt. As the two lovebirds spent what they thought were their final moments embraced, Ryue got so irritated that she kicked Ing away and knocked Musi unconscious. He lost consciousness and woke up in another dimension, where he found an underworld guardian who introduced himself as Schwanzi. leaving Ing completely surprised. Xuanzi summoned the black sky and displayed his power, leaving Ing all excited because he recognized the weapon immediately. Xuanzi said his spiritual energy came from the same source as his, but was surprised to learn Ing wasn't from the same lineage, deducing he must be the cultivation partner of one of his descendants. Ing remembered Muzi talking about her ancestor and wondered if it was the same person, so he mentioned her name to see how Xuanzi would react. He told Xuanzi he was Muzi's husband, which amused the old guardian upon realizing this was indeed his descendant's cultivation partner, deciding to give him a special gift to help boost his cultivation. He summoned the honey and beads and handed them over, explaining he had obtained them by chance hundreds of years ago and had left something inside that could help him, mentioning he was low on spiritual energy, so he could only help him escape his current dangerous situation. The guardian prepared to leave and told Ing he would recover his power as soon as he returned to his world, but when Ing asked how to use the beads, the old man just mocked him without giving an answer. Later, as Muzi cried over his unconscious body, as if at a funeral, a beam of bright light suddenly shot from his body into the sky. Ing emerged from the light with a completely changed appearance, carrying Muzi in his arms, which absolutely shocked Rue and left her wondering what the hell had just happened. She was completely shaken by the insane spiritual power emanating from him and how quickly he was leveling up, as if he had cheat codes activated, panicking thinking she couldn't fight him at his current trash level and might be sent to the afterlife at that rate, wondering if his power level was higher than her master's, so she immediately activated her fire whip and launched an attack. But Ing destroyed it with just one word, leaving her absolutely stunned, and she collapsed on the ground, like a deflated balloon. Now that her magic weapon was completely destroyed, this girl decided the best solution was to jump off the roof since there was no hope left. But Muzi quickly jumped after her and saved her, which totally took her by surprise. He called her an idiot and said it was just a fight and she didn't need to erase herself from existence over something so basic, suggesting she could just run away, which was better than turning into a pancake on the pavement. When they got back to the roof, the ungrateful girl pushed him and asked what a weakling like him knew about how cruel the world really was, running off. And while Ing was worried about her mental state, Muzi told him not to waste energy caring, since everyone had their own problems, pinching his ear and starting to interrogate him about the crazy power he had just shown. He tried to trick her, saying it had always been his dream to act cool once in his life, but she didn't buy his shoddy explanation, so she slapped his head and started dragging him somewhere. Later, in the hotel room, she asked why his spiritual power suddenly skyrocketed, but he just talked nonsense to avoid telling what really happened. She said his ability to absorb her spiritual power was a complete mystery, but he kept playing dumb, so she decided it was time to use special interrogation techniques, tying him to the bed and climbing on top of him, ready for action. She said that this was the Lee family's cultivation method and then gave him a kiss, asking him not to be startled and explaining that the method could balance yin and yang and let the spiritual power flow through both of their bodies, after which they could begin to work. Ing entered another dimension and, surprisingly, found the scene familiar, where their spiritual powers merged and he suddenly began to see the deep memories hidden within her mind. He woke up in a strange field, apparently inside Muzi's memory, and looked around wondering where she was, then spotted a locked door and went there to check. As soon as he touched it, a light began to shine and it instantly opened to another place, where he saw a drop of blood falling from a flower. He looked confused, asking what was happening, when the young Muzi suddenly appeared with a sad expression and started pulling his clothes without saying a single word, at which point a black hole opened beneath them and they both fell into it. Meanwhile, Misu was also exploring Ying's memory, heading towards the sea of his consciousness, as she planned to get closer to use their spiritual energy to detect which parts came from the same origin. However, upon getting closer, she felt an overwhelming wave from a magical weapon which she confirmed was truly alive, which completely shocked her. And she was immediately sucked into another tragic scene she had experienced before, seeing dead people on the ground and then spotting her enemy, who frightened her as he approached to send her to the next world as well. Ing woke up from his short nap in the middle of a burning house and immediately heard someone calling for help, quickly running there and being shocked to see a strange man on top of a building. While wondering who that guy was, an injured woman kept crying for help, but the stranger approached and eliminated her before Ing could do anything to save her. Both returned to reality, and Muzi started crying while Ing thought about his painful past, which made him determined to protect her at any cost. A few moments later, Muzi told him that her family had 34 descendants in modern civilization, but all except her were eliminated that night because of the family treasure called Black Heaven, adding that she would get revenge someday, as long as she kept holding the treasure. Ing asked her what the guy's cultivation level was and suggested they could team up to defeat him, but she said it wouldn't be easy because he had reached the initial stage of the nascent soul, becoming the patriarch with the highest cultivation level, who also had 6 other elders at the independent soul level, and if they faced him now, he would turn them into and use them for dinner. Upon hearing this, Ing reassured her, saying he would help her defeat this villain, and she then gave him a quick kiss on the cheek, leaving him red with embarrassment. He decided to reveal the spiritual energy he had been hiding from her, but she told him not to worry, since she hadn't detected any secrets in his consciousness before. but rather had felt a warmth she hadn't experienced in a long time, and soon told him to leave, which shocked this idiot who already thought he was going to get lucky that night. On the way back to his duty post, he discovered that the honey and beads he had taken were missing, making him panic about how he was going to survive in this modern cultivation world without any extra power. However, upon returning to his room, he was surprised to see Yuri lying on his bed in lingerie, waiting for him as if it was her turn that night, and she said she needed a favor from him. But the way she was dressed didn't help Ing keep his thoughts pure, explaining that she had no other place to stay and asking if she could sleep at his place, which made him wonder where the hell he was supposed to sleep. Then Lee immediately seized the opportunity and offered to share her bed with Ing, but the guy would rather sleep on the cold, hard floor than have his back damaged by the impact. The next day, a veritable parade of really unattractive guys who had fallen under some kind of dancing seduction spell lined up in front to ask her out, but she was getting frustrated by only seeming to attract complete losers. Another ugly suitor arrived in his car and almost ran over one of the other guys, and this fool spotted Musi approaching and immediately started acting like a love-struck puppy, asking her out on a date, but Musi harshly rejected him, saying he was too ugly and would need to prove he could take care of her and protect her for the rest of his life if he wanted to qualify as boyfriend material, then suggesting that Ryue would be perfect for him. But Ryue also rejected the idea, saying she didn't want some spoiled weakling who couldn't protect her. One of the ugly suitors offered himself as the perfect candidate, but she gave him a knockout punch and pointed directly at Ing, declaring that he was the one she wanted, leaving Ing super embarrassed thinking about the complicated mess his love life had become. And as he walked over to Musi, she said she was thinking of going to watch a movie with him, and the other one immediately leaned on him and said she wanted to watch too, which made Musi absolutely furious, causing the two girls to start fighting over him as if he were the last piece of cake at a birthday party, and all the other guys around started spitting blood from pure envy. Later, at the cinema, the two girls completely ignored the movie they paid to see and spent the whole time arguing over who could touch Ing, until they ended up kissing each other while trying to kiss him. The next day, Ing was carrying a gift for Musi, hoping to sort things out after the misunderstanding about his relationship with Ryue. However, on his way to meet her, Zhao intercepted him with a bunch of equally ugly thugs, planning to beat him up for stealing his crush, and the thugs asked if he knew he had offended someone important, but Ing pretended to be clueless and have no idea what they were talking about. They immediately tried to attack him, but he managed to trick them and tried to escape, unfortunately being tripped by Butler Zhao and falling face first to the ground, and the men ran after him like a pack of wild dogs. But before they could reach him, Musi noticed the situation from a distance and quickly ran to rescue him, defeating all the attackers. Afterwards, Ing presented his gift to Musi with nervous excitement, but when she opened it to see what was inside, she realized he was truly clueless, and he told her he was inexperienced, since it was his first time giving a gift to a girl and he thought all girls would love receiving chickens as gifts. Musi was disappointed by his complete lack of common sense, and he started begging for forgiveness while offering another ridiculous gift. Meanwhile, Ryue watched how the two interacted, got jealous of the obvious chemistry between them, and decided to leave them alone, while her master was on top of a building observing her and hoping she wouldn't disappoint him. After that awkward gift exchange, Musi and Ing walked together while talking about the gift he had just given her, and they spotted Ryue walking alone ahead, looking like the loneliest person on the planet. Ing thought she looked exactly like he used to. Lee was always alone without friends, and told Musi he wanted to go talk to her, and she agreed, so he ran to catch up to the sad girl, offering to be her friend. But Ryue pushed his hand away, and said if he hadn't received that big power-up the previous day, she would have sent both him and Musi straight to the afterlife without hesitation, revealing that the only reason she had approached him was because he had powerful energy and could serve as her personal bodyguard against danger. However, he told her not to worry, as he would protect her regardless. But she asked if Musi was the one who had sent him to mess with her feelings, and he replied that she had completely misjudged Musi's character, explaining that he had been inside her spiritual world and discovered that she carried the huge burden of her family's tragic death on her shoulders, and told Ryue that Musi also felt lonely, just like them, despite her tough appearance. Ryue admitted that she thought Musi was just a rich, arrogant princess who looked down on everyone, but he explained that Musi was just maintaining a strong facade in public, and that he was literally the only person she could truly rely on for support, and Ryue realized that was why he was so desperately committed to protecting her at all costs, and he promised her that he would do his best to protect her too, because they were real friends now. However, she got all flustered by his kindness and ran off like a scared rabbit, while Musi patted Ying's shoulder and warned him not to comfort Ryue too much, or she would get seriously jealous. Later that night, a random couple started getting involved in a romantic situation, but Ryue's boss appeared suddenly, ordering them to stop their activities immediately, and when a guy tried to defend his girlfriend, the psychopathic old man simply lifted him and broke his neck, then activated his evil powers while reasoning that the fruit he had carefully cultivated for years was fully ripe and ready for harvest. After this horrifying scene, he dragged the two dead lovers to his secret hideout, and Ryue went to meet him there while desperately thinking of an escape plan to avoid becoming her master's next snack, and he asked her about the mission he had given, and she apologized for failing. explaining that Ing had gotten incredibly more powerful during their fight, so much so that she couldn't eliminate him even if she tried with all her strength. He told her it was okay, and revealed that he had reached another breakthrough point since absorbing the blood of the two lovers. He had just eliminated, and that in 10 days he would erase Ing and Muzi from existence completely, after which he would absorb their blood and advance to the final stage of core formation, instructing Ryue to keep them distracted and prevent them from discovering his existence. Next, Ing looked for Ryue in the forest, and after wandering for a while, she suddenly appeared dressed in a way that would make a monk reconsider his life choices, and he was completely shocked to see her transformation and asked why she had called him in the middle of the night, dressed so provocatively, but she ignored the question and started unbuttoning her clothes right in front of him. Ing got super nervous and quickly covered his face, but still left a small gap to peek, and she asked if he would like to applaud, but he was too embarrassed to say yes and said he couldn't betray Muzi like that, although he was clearly tempted. She got angry at the rejection and immediately summoned her magical weapon, starting to attack him with deadly blows, but he dodged all her moves, and she challenged him to use his spiritual energy to fight for real, but he refused, saying he couldn't fight his friend no matter what, and she warned him that he would die if he kept being so stubborn. She soon tried to stab him as she had tried before, but he didn't fight back nor tried to resist the attack, which made her cry as she hit him for not using his spiritual energy to defend himself, and she demanded to know why he wouldn't fight her, and he gently stroked her head while explaining that his spiritual energy was meant to protect her, not to hurt her. Muzi found them in that suspicious position and threatened to cut his parts off for betraying her, so they quickly separated as if caught red-handed, and Ryue then said that even if she didn't eliminate them, her master would end up doing the job anyway, but Ing said that was exactly why they desperately needed her help on their side. She then revealed the shocking truth that her master had sensed the release of their spiritual energy during the recent battles, which made them realize they were in serious trouble, and they concluded that her master had sent her to fight them just to test their power levels through combat and gather information. Ryue told them that her master would soon reach the middle stage of core formation, and after this transformation, he would definitely erase them from existence without breaking a sweat, making Ing realize it was time to start preparing for the final battle against the supreme boss. Meanwhile, back at his hideout, Ryue's master finished consuming the two dead students and was excited to see his cultivation level increasing at lightning speed, concluding that what he needed now was the blood of Ing and Muzi, which would bring him to the intermediate stage of core formation and save him 10 years of tedious cultivation, and concluded that Ryue's master was basically the root of all their problems. But this genius thought that Ryue going against her master would be breaking some ancient moral code, as if she owed him her life or something. However, Muzi brought some reality and told him that teacher-student relationships were dead in this treacherous cultivation world, where everyone was busy plotting each other's downfall behind fake smiles. Ing then asked Ryue if she had been bound to this master since she was young, and she decided to tell her tragic life story. A long time ago, she lived in a small village where her parents treated her like their precious little princess, but the problem was that she had no friends because all the other kids kept calling her a monster and bullying her nonstop. After distributing free reality lessons to these bullies for getting on her last nerve, even while trying her best to control her temper, she would escape the cave to spend time with her only friend, a snake spirit, feeding the slippery friend and caring for it so it would recover from whatever injury it had, and Ryue kept wishing her best snake friend would evolve to human form so they could actually talk and she could show everyone how loyal her friend was, thinking they would be friends forever, but life had other plans that would separate them. One day, while heading to the cave for her usual session with the snake, she passed by a seer who was busy tricking a crowd of unsuspecting people with his fake predictions, and this old charlatan suddenly spotted her passing by and tried to stop her, but she quickly passed him because she had no interest in his nonsense. However, as she kept walking, the old man started chattering about how she had a special body and offered to teach her the way of the so-and-so, but she didn't care for his sales pitch and only thought about the food she needed to bring for her friend, and the old man kept talking and suddenly warned her to stay away from that monster she called a friend, which made her freeze, adding that this creature would be the reason she would lose everything she loved if she didn't cut ties immediately. But she ran off because she didn't want to hear any of his gloomy predictions. She ran to the cave and found blood spilled everywhere, becoming horrified and immediately starting to run back to the city, tripping and falling face first to the ground. But when she looked up, she got the biggest fright of her life, seeing her entire city looking like a barbecue that went terribly wrong, with the snake spirit apparently having fun, sending everyone on express trips to the afterlife without any discrimination. Ryue returned to her burning city in pure terror and started searching for her parents among a pile of bodies scattered everywhere, soon discovering that they too had received their one-way tickets to the afterlife, and she broke down in tears as if her world had ended. Suddenly, she spotted the seer lying there, all injured and barely breathing, and ran to him. And he revealed that the snake spirit had escaped to a forest and died while trying to tell her to go after the monster, and she kept crying, blaming herself for being responsible for everyone being erased from existence. She grabbed a metal bar and went straight to the forest to hunt the snake spirit, but when she arrived at the cave, a random guy appeared and called her an idiot for trying to face the snake spirit alone, as if she were an action heroine, and he apologized for not stopping the monster from turning her village into a graveyard and said she needed to stay alive since she was literally the only remaining person from her hometown. Ryue ignored his advice and tried to pass by him, but failed miserably. The stranger explained that she could not defeat the snake spirit because these creatures became completely out of control during full moon nights. He then handed her a special weapon that could actually eliminate the monster once and for all. Ryue immediately grabbed it and followed the snake's blood trail into the forest until she found her old friend lying on the ground, looking as if she had been through a blender. She approached the snake spirit, still boiling with anger over her village being destroyed, and threatened to end him, demanding to know why he had committed this massacre. The snake spirit suddenly lunged at her, making Ryue fall to the ground from fear. However, she managed to activate the dagger in her hand and stabbed the creature as it approached. The snake spirit collapsed on her shoulder and died, which triggered a flood of memories, showing all the good times they had shared together. After finally crawling out of the forest, she saw the old man floating in the air like some kind of mystical being and immediately deduced that he was an immortal. She fell to her knees and begged him to bring back all the people from her village. But he told her that life, death, and reincarnation were controlled by heavenly laws which he would not dare to mess with by playing resurrection games. She said her heart felt like it was being torn apart and asked what she should do about it. He offered her the chance to become his student on the cultivation journey, promising that it would numb her heart so she would no longer feel pain. She was astonished and immediately agreed to become his apprentice. After that, he became her master, and she followed him on the path of cultivation. But one day, during training, she made a shocking discovery that he was using some twisted blood-drinking techniques to increase his cultivation level. His entire attitude towards her changed from mentor to predator, and he began to look at her as if she were his next meal instead of his student. Back in the present, Ing was completely impressed by this story and explained that this kind of evil technique could drain the blood of normal people to increase cultivation power. When it came to consuming a cultivator's blood, it could make him break through to higher levels. Basically, cultivator blood was like premium energy drinks for his twisted training method. Musi then realized that if Ryue's master defeated them and drank their blood, he would advance to the late-stage core formation level, which made him panic about their current situation. Musi declared they were completely fried, even with their artificial weapons, but said they needed to move fast, because if they stood still doing nothing, her master would finish his evil blood-drinking technique and steal their spiritual energy by force. Upon hearing this terrifying news, Ing became completely terrified and suggested to Musi that they should simply run away to some distant place where no one could find them. Musi also started daydreaming about retiring from society to some romantic refuge where they could spend quality time together. And Ryue got jealous seeing these two lovebirds having their moment and immediately interrupted their ridiculous fantasy, telling them that her master would track them down no matter where they try to hide. Ing, still being a complete idiot, then begged Musi to transfer all her spiritual energy to him, because he thought it might give him enough power to defeat the creepy old man. He added that even if he died in the process, he wouldn't mind trading his life for her happiness. The two started having another one of those cheesy romantic moments, but Ryue gave him a good smack on the head. Ing asked what they should do then, and she replied that they might have a chance if they worked as a team. He was shocked, wondering if she was planning to turn against her master, and she replied that it wouldn't even count as rebellion, since her master had had his eye on her spiritual energy like a hungry wolf for a long time. Her instinct told her that her expiration date was rapidly approaching. She begged that she didn't want to simply accept death lying down, saying they still had a chance to fight as long as they worked together. Musi warned him not to trust this proposal, as it could be a trap, but explained that her master's talent was quite bad and she had no idea why. However, her master had finally managed to reach the core formation stage after years of stealing people's blood. She added that she had spent half the training time just to reach the foundation establishment stage. But if her master kept rapidly advancing his cultivation by draining others, she would be dead and buried before she reached core formation. Ing asked if their teamwork would really give them a chance to beat this guy, and she replied that there might still be hope since her master hadn't completed his evil technique yet. Otherwise, they could only pray that their souls wouldn't perish in the fire. She further explained that they needed to launch a surprise attack while he was off guard, but Musi objected that even if the three of them teamed up against him, they would still just be a bunch of weaklings compared to his power level. However, Ryue revealed that his blood-drinking technique had a major weakness, and if they could lure him into the trap, there might be a chance to defeat him. Later that night, Musi and Ing were at the hotel, and he asked her if they were going to cultivate that night. But Musi hit his head in response, calling him a loser for even suggesting it. However, she was actually jealous, because he was trying to play the hero for Ryue again, but he replied that he was just trying to live up to the name his father gave him. Musi thought that was a solid answer and told him that, since he decided to fight, they needed to increase their chances of winning. This excited him because he thought she had agreed to help him so they could achieve core formation together. But she gave him a big no. Again, he was disappointed, wondering why they even rented a hotel room. She suddenly grabbed his hand and said that the last time they kissed, she saw a bright sphere in his consciousness world, but he pretended not to know what she was talking about. Musi said it wasn't that, saying she felt that the energy of that light sphere was similar to her family's power, and it wasn't the same spiritual energy he had absorbed from her. She added that this power was stronger than anything she had ever seen, but he said he felt that this was just his potential as a cultivator. Furthermore, she said that if he could access that energy, they could actually defeat the old man they were fighting. He asked how he could release this power, and she explained that it could work as an artificial or spiritual weapon. So, he would need to use his blood to activate it and form a contract with the power. Upon hearing this, Ing got excited about the possibility of winning, but Musi brought bad news, saying it was quite risky to release a weapon spirit, because it could take over his body completely. This scared Ing deeply, but he agreed to release the weapon spirit anyway, since this was the best option among all his terrible choices. And Musi immediately cut his palm with her magic weapon while summoning the spirit. The spirit materialized, and Ing offered his blood to form the contract. Then a beautiful lady spirit appeared, which Musi realized had an incredibly high cultivation level, and got excited thinking they no longer needed to fear the scary old man. However, the weapon spirit burst his bubble when she told him that he needed to be at the soul ascension level to unleash her full power. She added that he was too weak to keep her summoned for long, more like a 1-minute cultivation man. And she disappeared just to really emphasize her point. Musi told him that his cultivation level couldn't use any tiny fraction of her true strength, and the loser suggested that they do something naughty to increase his power, but she rejected him again. Later that night, Ing thought that if he couldn't use the weapon spirit to fight, he would at least use her for some more intimate benefits. So he cut his palm again to try to summon her, but had difficulties. The next day, while walking thinking about the strategy to defeat Ryue's master, Zhao appeared again with 2 cultivators and demanded that he hand over Musi if he wanted to keep breathing. But he said the decision was up to Musi, which really pissed him off. Zhao ordered the 2 cultivators with him to attack, and as they charged with devastating attacks, Ryue and Musi suddenly appeared to block them. Both summoned their special weapons, and upon seeing this, the 2 cultivators got excited, making Ryue and Musi realize they were dealing with weapon hunters. Both launched attacks with their weapons, but the 2 cultivators quickly cast some spells that neutralized their attacks and captured both, preventing them from using their powers. Ing tried to join the fight too, but they quickly knocked him to the ground. One of the cultivators threatened to erase him permanently if Ryue and Musi didn't hand over their weapons. Ing started talking nonsense, and the guy decided to silence him forever. But just as he was about to stab him, a bright light suddenly shone, and the spirit of his weapon appeared to save his skin. He also freed Musi and Ryue, shocking the 2 cultivators, who immediately tried to flee. But Musi stopped them, and they fell to their knees begging for mercy before running away with their tails between their legs. Meanwhile, Ryue's master was watching from a distance, and he was thrilled that these fools would soon become his sacrificial offerings to achieve the final stage of core formation. Musi gave Zhao the ultimate warning to never mess with Ing again, or she would show him what pain really meant. This completely destroyed Zhao's soul, and the poor boy ran off like a rejected puppy after being turned down by a girl in front of everyone. Meanwhile, Ing was examining the weapon spirit as if he had never seen anything so wild before, wondering how something like this could exist. The weapon spirit introduced herself and mentioned having some kind of blood contract with Ing, which made things even more confusing. Musi was shocked that Ing managed to train the spirit so well in just one night, which seemed impossible for someone of his level. Ryue started talking about having seen his powerful cultivation weapon before, but Ying's brain immediately remembered Xuanzi's warning to keep his mouth shut about their encounter and the weapon he received, or there would be serious consequences. Since the Hundian beads were linked to Xuanzi's family legacy, he knew he couldn't reveal the secret, so he quickly lied and said he had no idea where the weapon came from. Ryue asked the weapon spirit what her name was, thinking they could find out more about the cultivation weapon from her identity. But the spirit dropped a bombshell by saying she had no name at all. Everyone stood there like confused statues until Ing suggested they give her one. Ing called her Ling, which she immediately accepted, since he was her master. Ryue went to prepare the Yang Flame Array, which they needed for the imminent confrontation with her evil master. Musi turned to Ing and said that he needed to stop being so weak in battles, which made him want to hide from shame. Ling supported Musi's criticism, saying that he really needed to improve his cultivation so he wouldn't become monster food. He felt like trash knowing how pathetic his fighting skills were, but Ling explained that his cultivation level was actually decent. He just fought like someone who had never thrown a punch in his life. She pointed out that Musi was worried about him being eliminated, and he admitted he was tired of always hiding behind women like a scared young man. So Ling decided to take him to another dimension to help improve his combat skills. Meanwhile, Musi watched him disappear from a distance, secretly hoping that Ling would teach him some escape techniques. as she thought they had practically zero chance of surviving the battle against Ryua's master. Ling showed him the amazing world inside the honey and beads, and his mind was completely blown by the fact that such an immense space could fit inside those small spheres. She explained that the cultivation world was full of miraculous weapon spirits and legendary weapons. Then she revealed her own origin story about being created by her original master, using 10 rare treasures and being strengthened with 10 years of pure spiritual energy in some frozen realm. Ing was impressed and concluded she must be incredibly powerful, but Ling brought him back to reality, reminding him that her power output was limited by her master's cultivation level. He asked if there was any way for her to eliminate the core formation monster with her high-level powers, and she confirmed that there was indeed a method, but it would mean she could never see him again. This news hit him like a truck, and he immediately asked if this required sacrificing her life, to which she confirmed with a simple yes. She explained that if he fused with her or became too intimate during cultivation, it would trigger a massive explosion that would turn hundreds of miles into a desert. Ing immediately rejected this idea, saying he would never let her be used as a disposable weapon. He then asked why he was still so weak, despite having more spiritual energy than Musi, and she explained the science to him. She explained that a cultivator's strength came from converting the essence of heaven and earth into spiritual energy through special energy channels in their bodies. Since his spiritual energy came from external sources, rather than his own cultivation work, he didn't have the know-how to actually use it properly. Surprised by this revelation, he asked how he could learn to use his current spiritual energy effectively. Ling said she had a solution and moved behind him to remove his clothes, which made him panic and ask if this was the same thing that could cause the massive explosion. He started freaking out and trying to stop what was happening, but Ling looked at him as if he had lost his mind, which made him realize his thoughts had wandered into inappropriate territory and he felt like a complete loser. She told him to sit down and close his eyes so she could guide his spiritual energy correctly. When she started moving her hands over his body to direct the energy flow, he got agitated again, but she told him to focus on the training instead of getting distracted. After she guided the spiritual energy through his system for a while, he was surprised to find he could actually control it. Ling said his learning speed was impressive and that with 5 to 10 days of cultivation, he could master using spiritual energy. He told her to stop joking because they had a big battle approaching and he didn't have weeks to spend training. She revealed there was another method where she could transfer her spiritual energy directly to him, which would allow him to use her power freely immediately. The downside was that the process would be extremely painful, but he told her to proceed anyway, since he was desperate. She started channeling her spiritual energy into his body, which felt like being struck by lightning repeatedly. The pain was so intense he thought he might pass out, but he endured it thinking about all the suffering Ryue and Musi had experienced in their pasts. The agony became almost unbearable, but finally the spiritual energy transfer was completed and both stood up. Just when they thought they could breathe a sigh of relief, a tree spirit that had been spying on them the whole time launched a surprise attack. Ing tried to block the tree spirit's attack, but accidentally destroyed it with an energy blast from his hand, which left him staring at his own palm as if he couldn't believe what had just happened. Ling explained that he could now use the spiritual energy transfer technique he had just experienced to perform low-level cultivation arts he had already learned. Upon hearing this, he quickly tested his new skills and was surprised when they actually worked properly. Ling congratulated him for finally figuring out how to use spiritual energy like a true cultivator instead of a complete amateur. He asked her why there was a tree spirit lurking around, and she admitted she didn't know all the secrets of the honey and beads, even having lived there for so long. All she could tell him was that the place was full of spiritual energy, much more concentrated than anything in the outside world, which explained why random creatures kept appearing. Later, Mista took them to a strange cultivation shop that looked more suspicious than a back alley business. Ling was surprised that these kinds of shady places still existed in the modern cultivation world. She spotted some questionable adult merchandise and innocently asked what they were for. Then Ing quickly made up a story about them being magical treasures used by older cultivators, hoping she would believe his explanation, and she did. They entered the shop and were greeted by some staff who tried too hard to be fun but ended up looking like complete clowns. Musi got irritated by their amateur performance and fried the laptop with her powers, which shocked them as they realized she was a real cultivator. The receptionist had the audacity to congratulate Musi for going into debt because that PC was a MacBook, but Musi made a total boss move by throwing her VIP credit card at them. The two unattractive receptionists almost fainted upon seeing it was an ultra-rare golden diamond VIP card that only the most elite customers possessed. They immediately decided to escort her to meet the boss personally, but when Ing and Ling tried to follow, the staff blocked them and said they didn't allow people without money in the VIP session. Musi handed Ing a bag full of low-level spiritual stones and told him to look around while she handled business. Ling explained that these spiritual stones were basically the currency of the cultivation world, which fascinated Ing, since he had never dealt with magical money before. The receptionist could sense his inexperience from afar and decided to target him. She suggested they take a look at the shop's magical treasures, and he eagerly agreed, since he desperately needed a decent weapon for the upcoming battle. The lady took them to the treasure section and showed them various products, but everything was way beyond his budget, since he only had 50 spiritual stones to spend. The receptionist told him that, even with their generous discount, the cheapest item in the shop still cost 300 spiritual stones. Ing was disheartened and said he'd rather save his money instead of spending it on expensive things. But the receptionist wasn't willing to let a potential customer leave with unspent money. She told him they could offer a chance to win high-value items through their special program, which immediately caught his attention like a fish seeing bait. She suggested they play a betting game where he could win valuable magical treasures or completely worthless junk with just a small investment. Ing asked Ling if he should participate, and she gave him the green light. So he followed the receptionist to check out the prize selection. Meanwhile, the shop owner examined Musie's VIP card and was surprised to find it was completely legitimate. He told her that in the last 100 years, no family besides the legendary Lee Cultivation Clan had received such an exclusive card. The boss introduced himself as Mei, the branch manager, and Musie told him she wanted the most valuable magical item in the entire inventory. He said he could make that happen, but only if she handed over the VIP card as payment, to which she agreed without hesitation. While Mei went to fetch the item, the ugly male receptionist questioned if this was a smart business decision. Mei ignored his concerns, explaining that the item was basically useless anyway, since it could only protect users from attacks below the nascent soul level, making it outdated junk in the current cultivation scene. Back in the gaming section, the receptionist showed Ing and Ling a collection of sealed boxes containing hidden valuable treasures. Ling told him she could easily break the magical seals, so picking the best treasure wouldn't be a problem with her help. Ing got excited and started humming around, trying to decide which box looked most promising. When he asked for her opinion, Ling picked one that looked completely common and plain compared to the others. When they opened the box, they found only an old, rusty dagger called Blood Dragon Soul, which made the receptionist celebrate internally because she thought they had picked the worst possible prize, and Ing tested the weapon hoping to release some hidden power, but it seemed like just a common piece of junk that belonged in a trash can. After they left the betting area, the receptionist ran to her boss to brag about the easy profit she had just made from those naive customers. Mei praised her sales skill and asked which treasure was in the box they picked. When she casually mentioned it was just a rusty dagger called Blood Dragon Soul, Mei immediately lost some blood as he realized they had just accidentally given away one of their most valuable and legendary items to a pair of unsuspecting customers. Later, Rue appeared to report to her master like a good student, and he asked about the progress of the mission he had given her. She said she had completely failed, but this old man didn't buy her innocent act for a second. He revealed he already knew she had allied herself with those two cultivators to plan his elimination, which made Ryue's blood run cold. She tried to deny everything, but he dropped an even bigger bomb by saying everything was under his watchful eye, because he was disguised as the janitor cleaning the school the whole time. Rue was completely shaken and accused him of being a sneaky smartass, but he casually explained that disguising himself as a maintenance worker was the perfect way to drain some students while spying on her plans against him. Without warning, he launched a fierce attack against her, but she managed to dodge and started running for her life, while this psychopath chased her like a movie horror villain. Meanwhile, Ing and his team were examining their new weapon, when Ling revealed some important information about what he had actually won in that rigged game of chance. She told him it was a spiritual weapon seal with a true dragon soul trapped inside, which made his rusty dagger seem much more interesting. She explained that, according to legend, an experienced cultivator had eliminated a red dragon that was terrorizing the world and sealed its soul in this very dagger. She added that the red dragon blood coating the blade was extremely corrosive and could melt almost anything. Ing and Musie were impressed that Ling knew the entire history of this random weapon, and she told them she had been around for centuries, so she had heard all kinds of ancient stories. She then revealed the final twist. It was actually Xuanzi who had taken down the dragon, which made Ing realize he had found something incredibly valuable. He wondered what would happen if he released the true dragon to devour the core formation enemy, but Ling quickly dismissed that idea. She explained that the true dragon was a demonic beast that hated humans and would likely cause even more chaos if released. Furthermore, she had no idea how to actually release the thing, so that plan was dead in the water. Musie, being her usual pessimistic self, complained that this made the weapon completely useless, but Ling disagreed. She pointed out that, being a magical treasure, there had to be some technique for using it properly. She suggested Ing try channeling his spiritual energy into the dagger to see what would happen. So he tried immediately. The results were absolutely wild. He suddenly cloned himself into 3 copies using a technique called body separation. Musie, who could find a negative side even when winning the lottery, thought this was garbage. But Ling pointed out that she couldn't even tell which body was the real one, despite her advanced cultivation level, which was impressive. Musi was also shocked that he could now use spiritual energy so smoothly, and he gave all the credit to Ling for not giving up on his hopeless case. Suddenly, Ing received an urgent telepathic message from Ryue, warning him that her master planned to eliminate them all and telling him to meet at the predetermined location. He immediately informed Musi and prepared to leave, but she got scared and asked if he really wanted to go through with this mission. When he confirmed he was committed, she handed him the protective pendant she had bought from the shady cultivation shop and made him promise to stay alive no matter what happened. Everyone left together in a hurry, with Ing determined to protect Musi at all costs. The evil master continued to hunt Ryue like a bloodhound and revealed that this had been his master plan since the day he accepted her as a student. He had always intended to eventually eliminate her so he could advance to the final stage of core formation, which left Ryue absolutely furious for having been deceived for so long. Meanwhile, Musi told Ing they weren't nearly strong enough to defeat the enemy and suggested they try to figure out how to use the array formation, since that was their only hope for victory. However, Ing felt something was seriously wrong with this whole situation, even if he couldn't pinpoint exactly what was wrong. The evil cultivator finally cornered Ryue when she ran out of places to escape, and with nowhere left to run, she decided to fight with everything she had. But this arrogant novice told her she had absolutely no chance of victory against someone of his level. He launched an attack against her, but Ing intervened with a perfectly timed counterattack that saved her from being eliminated. The evil cultivator noticed Ing was using the body separation technique, but didn't seem impressed and unleashed a devastating attack called Bloody Palm, which targeted all three of them. They quickly moved to defend themselves, but still got quite injured. Ing attacked with his clones, while Ryue and Musi followed with their own special moves, but the old monster blocked everything they threw at him. Ryue realized his defense was too strong and they needed to find some weakness they could exploit, so they decided to coordinate their attacks. But this twisted old man was enjoying watching their desperate attempts, mocking them about how ignorant they were regarding the true power of cultivation at the core formation level. He soon completely overpowered them, which made Ing think about using the real dragon blood on his dagger as a last resort. He charged at the enemy with a direct punch attack, but at the exact moment their attacks collided, he quickly summoned his dagger and managed to break through the villain's defense, causing a small amount of damage to his chest. The old psychopath was completely stunned that someone could actually hurt him at the core formation level, and started wondering what kind of crazy weapon Ing was wielding. He lunged forward like a maniac, grabbed Ing by the throat, and started draining his spiritual energy like some kind of energy vampire. But then Ing disappeared into thin air, and one of his clones appeared to attack the confused old man, making him realize he had been strangling a fake the whole time. What this ancient fool didn't know was that the Blood Dragon Dagger had an even more powerful ability. It allowed the user to transfer their soul between different bodies, which meant Ing could basically teleport out of danger by switching to another clone whenever things got tricky. The old monster decided to stop playing around and activated his supreme technique called the Demonic Art, which started pulling them toward him while simultaneously draining their blood and spiritual energy like the world's most terrifying vacuum cleaner. Ing immediately summoned Ling, who counterattacked the deadly technique and saved them from being turned into dry husks. She created a protective barrier around them and told Ing she could only hold this madman for about 2 hours before her power ran out. The old demon tried to figure out what level Ling's cultivation was at, but when he couldn't properly sense it, he assumed she was just bluffing and launched another attack that cracked her barrier. However, Ling reinforced the barrier immediately, which shocked the old man as he realized this wasn't an empty threat after all. But the barrier began shrinking under pressure, which left the evil cultivator excited because he thought victory was within reach. He started launching attack after attack on the barrier, while wondering why someone with such a high cultivation level wasn't fighting back. Eventually, his neurons connected the dots and he deduced that Ling must be a weapon spirit, which explained why she could only defend and not attack. He was shocked to discover Ling's true nature, and Ing told his friends they needed to escape immediately while Ling kept the monster busy. They ran into the forest to set up the array formation they needed to trap this idiot. And after reaching safety, Ing absorbed Ling back into his body, where she belonged. After some time, the old man caught up to them and was surprised they had stopped running like scared rabbits. He advanced toward them with murderous intent. Ryue immediately began casting the spell to activate the trap. The evil cultivator fell right into their trap and began struggling against the magical bindings. Then Ing and Musi quickly launched their attacks while the iron was hot, and Ryue also unleashed her most powerful technique, but everyone was speechless when the old man suddenly broke free and flung them back like they were annoying flies. He demanded to know why their carefully crafted plan had no effect on him and started laughing like the master manipulator he was. He revealed that she must have secretly studied his demonic art techniques from his personal instruction book, but then revealed the final twist. All the weaknesses and countermeasures written in that book were completely false. He had deliberately included false information to trick her into using the specific array formation, which would actually enhance the power of his demonic art instead of weakening it. Basically, they had just handed him the perfect setup to eliminate them and steal all of their spiritual energy. They realized they had fallen into the most elaborate trap in the world and were completely doomed. So they began to run for their lives again as the old demon tried to block their escape. Ing summoned Ling once more to block his path and give his friends a chance to escape. The evil cultivator watched his prey fleeing and began to think of ways to stop them from escaping his reach. Suddenly, he called Rue and began talking about a massacre that had destroyed her village years ago, which made her freeze in place as if struck by lightning. He began to tell the most twisted backstory of all, explaining that 20 years ago he was tracking the snake spirit to her village because he wanted to get his hands on the creature's core, but he never expected to find a Ryue who had already reached the advanced stage of ki condensation, which was absolutely insane for someone so young. He discovered that Ryue had a special body that could cultivate automatically from birth, which he saw as the ultimate prize to fix his own terrible cultivation talent. This sick man disguised himself as a seer and tried to convince the young Ryue to go with him, but when she refused, he devised the most evil plan imaginable. He decided to massacre her entire village, disguised as the snake spirit, and even used a magical herb that could make the snake spirit go completely insane. The innocent little girl thought her best friend had wiped out everyone she loved and begged him for help to get revenge, which gave him the perfect opportunity to manipulate her into following him and training under his twisted guidance. The old psychopath then revealed the final blow. Not only had he managed to trick Ryue into becoming his student, but he had also obtained the snake spirit's core during all that chaos. Hearing this completely broke Ryue's heart and she began to cry, thinking about how her only friend had been used as a weapon against her own family. Anger and betrayal hit her like a freight train, but she summoned her power as she charged back towards this monster who had destroyed her entire life. Ing followed right behind her as support. And when Rue approached the old devil with a furious attack, he blocked her attack with a powerful barrier as if it were nothing. But while this arrogant old man was focused on Ryue, Ing appeared out of nowhere and stabbed him with the dragon's blood soul, which managed to pierce his defenses. The old man was absolutely furious and activated an insane control art technique that began to mess with the very weather. Meanwhile, in the sky, Zhao was flying in his private jet with his butler when sudden turbulence hit the aircraft and doomed it to a crash landing. The pilot immediately grabbed a parachute and abandoned everyone else, leaving Zhao and his butler to figure out their own survival plan. Another passenger, who clearly didn't care about others while being grabbed a second parachute and tried to save himself, but the loyal butler stopped him and insisted that his master had to escape first. But honestly, who really cared about saving Zhao? After all, the selfish passenger wrestled with the butler for the parachute, which unfortunately tore the object and made the guy plummet to his doom faster than the plane itself would have crashed. The butler spotted one last parachute and grabbed his master as he desperately tried to reach the emergency equipment that was about to fall out of the plane. Meanwhile, Musi had her own crazy idea and flew into the sky to mount the falling aircraft before activating her ultimate technique called Heaven's Punishment. She directed the entire plane towards the old devil like a guided missile. And when he saw this disaster approaching, he was shocked, but also grateful that Musi was only at the Foundation establishment level. Otherwise, he would have to run for his life. When Musi approached with her airplane projectile, the old devil immediately began absorbing the thunder energy from the heavenly punishment to help him advance to the final stage of core formation. This was followed by a massive explosion from the plane crash that illuminated the entire battlefield. And Musi began to dodge the lightning attacks the old monster was throwing at her. The evil cultivator gathered a powerful lightning bolt in his hand and threw it at Musi, which knocked her out of the sky. Ing quickly ran to rescue her, but as he caught her in his arms, the old man launched another devastating lightning attack against them. However, the protective pendant Musi had given him earlier suddenly activated and saved them from being electrocuted. But this relentless old man wasn't about to give up. He prepared to launch yet another attack when the old devil approached them for the final blow. And Ing combined his powers with Musi's cultivation and launched a joint technique called Heavenly Girlfriend Punishment, which instantly severed one of the monster's arms and proved that teamwork really could defeat evil. The old psychopath became even more enraged and immediately launched his most devastating attack called Blood Absorption, which began to drain their blood and spiritual energy at the same time, like a kind of demonic vacuum cleaner. Ling appeared to try and reduce the effect of this deadly technique, but she couldn't hold on for long, as Ing was losing spiritual energy faster than water draining from a bathtub. Ing realized that since Ling's power came directly from his own energy, if this monster kept absorbing his cultivation, she would also be weakened. So he ordered her to retreat into the honey and beads while he handled the situation alone. He charged towards the old man while summoning his dagger. But the evil cultivator immediately activated his control art technique to steal control of the weapon and turn it against its own master. Ing felt his blood burning within his veins and remembered that the real dragon blood coating on the dagger could corrode anything it touched, including his own body. The old man continued draining his life force and suddenly grabbed Musi with his energy, pulling her towards him like a rag doll. She soon lost consciousness after having too much spiritual energy drained from her body, and seeing this made Ing completely lose his head in fury. The next morning, they set out to find the monster and attack, but the old man easily swatted him away like an annoying insect. Meanwhile, Rue was having hallucinations about her snake spirit friend and blaming herself for being too weak to achieve the revenge she had desired for so many years. Ing saw Muzi lying motionless on the ground and immediately grabbed his dagger again, but this time something different happened. He transformed when his rage reached its absolute peak. He deliberately cut his own arms with a corrupted blade and threw the dagger high into the air, then taunted the old man to absorb all the blood he wanted. However, his blood passed through the floating dagger first, which caused it to become corroded before the evil cultivator unknowingly absorbed the poison life force into his own body. The old monster immediately began to feel a burning sensation spreading inside, and his face began to melt as if acid were corroding his skin, which left him completely shocked. This horrific reaction interrupted the blood absorption technique, and Rue immediately launched another attack against him, but he still had enough strength to deflect her attack and kick her away like a soccer ball. He tried to attack Ing next, but our hero blocked the blow and immediately charged forward at full speed. The old man's body was rapidly corroding from the poisonous blood, so he quickly activated some earth manipulation technique and launched multiple attacks over Ing, but nothing could stop him now. He broke through all defenses and advanced with unstoppable momentum before driving the dagger directly into the monster's chest. The evil cultivator began to burn from the inside out, and with his last breath, declared that his senior fellow apprentice would come to avenge his death. He also cast a curse on Ing, saying that he would live in constant fear for the rest of his life. But Ing thought this was just the desperate delusion of a defeated villain. Rue was extremely happy to have finally gotten revenge for her friend and family after all these years of suffering. Ing walked over to Muzi's unconscious body and suddenly called out to some unknown elder, who was surprised that his presence had been detected. Ing explained that he had felt someone watching them ever since Muzi entered his consciousness and made contact with the honey and beads. The mysterious elder asked why he was revealing himself now, and Ing said he wanted help to save Muzi's life. When the elder questioned why he should provide assistance, Ing bowed deeply and promised to do anything required of him. The elder then revealed that he had his eye on Ing, specifically to get the honey and beads. So, Ing immediately summoned the precious artifact and offered it without hesitation. But the unknown elder explained that he couldn't take the beads from that location because he existed in a different dimensional space. Instead, he proposed a 3-year agreement where Ing would have to bring the honey and beads personally. When Ing asked the name of this mysterious place, the elder said, revealing it was forbidden by the highest rules of that realm, and that he would need to discover the answers for himself. Ing then asked what would happen if he didn't fulfill the terms of this agreement, and the elder coldly told him that Muzi's life would be lost, which sent chills down his spine. Later, after Muzi recovered from her injuries, she took him to a quiet garden where she used to spend good times with her mother. In this beautiful setting, he promised to protect her and prevent anything terrible from happening to her again. And after hearing his sincere vow, Muzi decided it was finally time to take back her true first kiss from him.